The morning sun cast its gentle rays over Ouagadougou's skyline, painting the city in hues of amber and gold. The bustling streets were just beginning to stir with life, vendors setting up their stalls, motorcycles weaving through the awakening traffic, and the distant call to prayer echoing from the mosques. Amidst this gradual awakening, a frail elderly woman made her way slowly toward the National Savings Bank building that stood imposingly at the corner of Revolution Avenue. Her name was Amina, and at 77 years old, she carried the weight of decades spent toiling in the fields under the unforgiving African sun. Every wrinkle on her weathered face told a story of hardship, resilience, and unwavering determination. Her hands trembled slightly, not just from age, but from the anxiety that gripped her heart. Her back was bent from years of labor, and her faded, worn dress spoke of a life lived in modest circumstances. Yet despite her appearance, there was something remarkable in her eyes, a steely resolve that refused to be extinguished. Today was crucial. Her grandson, her beloved Musa, had been bedridden for weeks now. The small village clinic had exhausted all its options, and the doctors had shaken their heads gravely, saying they needed to transfer the boy to the regional hospital in the capital. But hospital treatment required money, money that Amina had been carefully saving for decades in this very bank. Every small coin she could spare from selling vegetables at the market, every bit she managed to save from her meager pension had gone into that account. Today, she would finally withdraw those savings to save the life of her grandson. As she approached the bank's glass doors, Amina paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The modern building, with its reflective windows and polished exterior, seemed to belong to a different world, a world far removed from her small mud brick house in the village. She had been coming to this bank for 40 years, ever since it first opened its doors to serve the people of Burkina Faso. Back then, she had been a young widow with children to feed, and she had made a solemn promise to herself that she would save every franc she could for emergencies. That promise had taken decades to fulfill, but she had never faltered. With determination etched on her face, Amina pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The cool air conditioning immediately embraced her, a stark contrast to the warm morning outside. The interior was immaculate, gleaming marble floors, spotless glass partitions, and the soft hum of computers and conversations. Well-dressed bank employees moved about with practiced efficiency, and customers stood in orderly lines, most of them men in business attire or traditional boo-boos. Amina felt a familiar mixture of belonging and alienation. She had been a customer here for 40 years, yet each visit reminded her that she was different from most of the other patrons. She was a simple village woman in a world of urban sophistication. But today was not a day for self-doubt. Today she needed to be strong for Musa. She joined the queue, standing behind several men who were engaged in animated conversations about business deals and political developments. The line moved slowly, and Amina's feet began to ache from standing. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clutching a worn envelope close to her chest. Inside that envelope were her precious documents, her account passbook, her national identity card, and the original papers she had received when she first opened her account in 1983. 20 minutes passed. The air conditioning made her shiver slightly, and she pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, it was her turn. She stepped forward to the counter, where a young man in his early 30s sat behind a computer screen. He wore a crisp white shirt and a blue tie, and his fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard as he attended to something on his screen. Amina cleared her throat softly. "Good morning, my son." The teller didn't look up. His eyes remained fixed on the computer screen, his expression one of practiced indifference. Amina waited a moment, then spoke again, her voice gentle but carrying a note of urgency. "Excuse me, sir. I need to make a withdrawal from my account." Still no response. The young man's fingers continued their mechanical dance across the keyboard, as if she weren't even there, as though she was invisible, a ghost that others could choose to ignore. Amina felt a familiar ache in her chest, the ache of being dismissed, of being considered insignificant. But she had not come this far to give up. She placed her envelope on the counter, the soft thud finally drawing the teller's attention. He glanced up, and for a brief moment his eyes swept over her, taking in her wrinkled face, her threadbare clothing, her trembling hands. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a mixture of annoyance and disdain flickering across his features. He sighed, as if her very presence was an inconvenience to his day. "What do you want?" he asked curtly, his tone lacking any warmth or courtesy. "I need to withdraw money from my account," Amina repeated, her voice steady despite the hurt she felt. "My grandson is very ill, and I need to pay for his hospital treatment." The teller's eyes narrowed slightly. Without reaching for the envelope, he leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. "Do you even have an account here?" The question struck Amina like a physical blow. She had been banking here for 40 years, making regular deposits, never missing a payment, always treating the bank staff with respect. And now this young man, who was probably not even born when she opened her account, was questioning whether she even belonged here. "Yes, my son," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "I have been a customer here for many, many years. All my documents are in this envelope." She pushed the envelope closer to him, but the teller made no move to take it. Instead, he looked at it with barely concealed contempt, as if it might contaminate him somehow. "These papers look very old," he said dismissively, not even bothering to open the envelope. "Probably outdated. I can't process such ancient documents. They're not acceptable." Amina felt her world tilting. "But these are the original documents the bank gave me," she protested, her voice becoming more desperate. "I've kept them safe all these years. I've used them many times before without any problem." The teller waved his hand dismissively. "Times change, old woman. We have new systems now, new procedures. These old papers won't work. Besides, we get a lot of people coming in here with fake documents, trying to scam the bank. I can't just trust anyone who walks in off the street." The words hit Amina with devastating force. She was being called a fraud, a scammer, a liar. She who had worked honestly every day of her life, who had never taken what wasn't hers, who had raised her children and grandchildren to be people of integrity, she was being accused of dishonesty. "Please, sir," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please, just check the system. My account number is there in the passbook. You'll see that everything is legitimate. My grandson is dying. I need this money for his treatment. I'm not trying to cheat anyone. This is my own money that I saved over many years." The teller laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that carried across the banking hall. "Everyone has a sob story. Do you think I was born yesterday? I've seen dozens of people like you trying to pull these tricks." Behind Amina, the men in the queue stood in uncomfortable silence. Some averted their eyes, unwilling to meet her gaze. Others shifted their feet nervously, clearly witnessing an injustice, but choosing not to intervene. Perhaps they feared causing trouble, or perhaps they simply didn't want to get involved in what they saw as someone else's problem. Their silence was its own form of complicity. Amina felt tears beginning to well up in her eyes. The humiliation was unbearable. She had endured poverty. She had endured widowhood. She had endured backbreaking labor in the fields. But this dismissal of her dignity, this casual cruelty, cut deeper than any physical hardship ever had. She was about to turn away, defeated and broken, when a voice cut through the tension in the banking hall. "What's happening here?" The voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable authority. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but something in its tone made everyone in the vicinity turn and look. Amina slowly turned around, her tear-filled eyes searching for the source of the voice. Near the entrance, a man in simple, unpretentious clothing was walking toward the counter. He wore no expensive suit, no designer watch, no symbols of power or wealth. His attire was that of an ordinary citizen, clean but modest, the kind of clothes any middle-class person might wear. He had been standing in the queue like everyone else, and no one had paid him any special attention. But now, as he approached, there was something about his bearing that commanded respect. He moved with quiet confidence, his eyes taking in the scene with sharp intelligence. His face was neither stern nor soft, but carried an expression of someone who had seen much and understood deeply. He came to stand beside Amina, and when he looked at her, his eyes held genuine concern. "Sister, are you all right?" he asked gently. Amina was taken aback by the kindness in his voice. A stranger, a complete stranger, was showing her more respect than the bank employee she had come to for help. Her voice trembled as she explained her situation, the words tumbling out in a mixture of pain and relief at finally being heard. I just came to withdraw some money from my account. My grandson is very sick, and the doctors say he needs treatment at the regional hospital. But this young man says my documents are fake, that I'm trying to cheat the bank. I've been a customer here for 40 years, but he won't even check the system to verify my account." The man in simple clothes nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Then he turned to face the teller, his expression becoming more serious. "Did you check her account in the system?" he asked quietly. The teller bristled with irritation. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but I suggest you mind your own business. This woman's papers are clearly questionable, and I'm not going to waste time." "I asked you a simple question," the man interrupted, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel. "Did you check her account in the system before rejecting her documents?" The teller's face flushed with annoyance. "Look, whoever you are, you need to get back in line and wait your turn. I'm handling this situation, and I don't need interference from other customers." "Answer the question," the man said, his tone now carrying unmistakable authority. "Did you check the system?" Something in his voice made the teller pause. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the young man's face. He glanced at the man more carefully, trying to place him, sensing that perhaps this was not just another ordinary customer. Well, no, I didn't check yet," the teller admitted reluctantly. "But it's obvious that—" "Nothing is obvious until you've done your job properly," the man said firmly. "This woman has come to this bank seeking service. The least you can do is check whether her account exists before making accusations." The teller's jaw tightened. His pride was wounded, and he didn't appreciate being corrected, especially not in front of other customers. But something about the stranger's demeanor gave him pause. With an exaggerated show of compliance, he turned to his computer and held out his hand for Amina's documents. "Fine," he muttered. "Give me the account number." With trembling fingers, Amina opened her envelope and carefully extracted her passbook. The pages were worn and yellowed with age, but her account number was clearly visible, written in the careful hand of a bank clerk from decades ago. The teller snatched the passbook and typed the number into his computer. His expression was one of impatient skepticism, clearly expecting the search to return no results, which would vindicate his earlier assessment. But as the screen loaded, something changed in his face. His eyes widened. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth fell open slightly as he stared at the information displayed before him. The screen showed everything. Amina's account opened on March 15, 1983, 42 years active, numerous deposits over the decades, a complete transaction history showing her diligent savings, and a current balance that was modest but respectable. Every detail confirmed exactly what she had been saying. The banking hall fell silent. Even the conversations at other counters seemed to pause, as if the entire building was holding its breath. The teller's hand trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. The account, he stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. It's legitimate, the man in simple clothes said quietly, just as she told you it would be. At that moment, one of the men standing in the queue pulled out his mobile phone. He had been watching the entire exchange with growing interest, and something about the stranger who had intervened was familiar. He quickly searched online, his eyes widening when he found what he was looking for. "That's President Ibrahim Traoré," he whispered to the person next to him, his voice barely audible but carrying enough to be heard by several people nearby. The whisper spread like wildfire through the banking hall. President Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, the man who had come to power promising to serve the people, to fight corruption, to restore dignity to the nation. And here he was, standing in a bank queue like any ordinary citizen, dressed in simple clothes, with no security detail, no fanfare, no protocol, defending an elderly woman who was being mistreated. The effect was instantaneous. The teller's face went from pale to ashen. His hands began to shake visibly. Other bank employees who had been going about their business froze in place, sudden recognition dawning on their faces. The bank manager, who had been in his office, came rushing out, his expression transforming from confusion to shock to absolute horror as he realized what was happening. "Mr. President," the manager gasped, his voice strangled. He stopped abruptly a few feet away, as if unsure whether to approach or keep his distance. Ibrahim Traoré held up his hand, gesturing for the manager to wait. His attention remained focused on the teller. "You made a serious judgment about this woman without doing even the most basic verification. You accused her of fraud, of bringing fake documents, of trying to scam the bank. You did this all based on what? Her appearance? Her age? The fact that her clothes are not expensive?" The teller looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. "Mr. President, I sincerely apologize. I didn't mean to—" "What did you mean to? You didn't mean to judge someone by how they look? You didn't mean to dismiss a customer without doing your job? Or you didn't mean to get caught?" The teller had no answer. He sat frozen in his chair, his entire body rigid with fear and shame. President Traoré turned to address not just the teller, but everyone in the banking hall. His voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable weight to his words. "This woman is Amina. She has been a loyal customer of this bank for 42 years, longer than many of you have been alive. She worked in the fields, under the sun, breaking her back to earn honest money. Every coin she saved came from sweat and sacrifice. She trusted this bank with her life savings. And today, when she came here in desperate need to save her grandson's life, she was treated like a criminal." He paused, letting his words sink in. No one dared to speak or even move. This is not just a failure of one employee. This is a failure of systems that have forgotten their purpose. Banks exist to serve the people, all people, not just those who arrive in expensive cars and designer suits. When institutions forget this, When they start judging people by superficial standards, they betray the very communities they were created to support. The president turned back to Amina, and his expression softened. Sister Amina, please accept my apology on behalf of this institution. You deserve better than this treatment. Amina, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, could barely speak. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks, no longer tears of humiliation, but tears of relief and vindication. "Thank you, my son. May Allah bless you. I never expected. I never thought—" "You never thought that someone would stand up for you? That is the saddest part of the story. Every citizen should expect to be treated with dignity. It shouldn't be a surprise when someone defends your rights. It should be the norm." He turned to the bank manager, who stood trembling a few feet away. "Process her withdrawal immediately, with full respect and courtesy. And I want to know what measures you're going to implement to ensure this never happens again." "Yes, Mr. President. Right away, sir. I will personally handle it." He practically ran to the counter, gently taking Amina's documents with both hands as if they were sacred artifacts. As the bank manager worked to process the withdrawal, President Traoré addressed the crowd that had gathered. "I know many of you are wondering why I'm here, standing in a bank queue without security, without protocol, dressed like this. Let me tell you why. A leader who distances himself from his people can never truly understand their struggles. If I only visited banks when they rolled out red carpets and cleared the halls, I would never see what really happens here. I would never witness moments like this." He gestured toward Amina. "This woman represents thousands, perhaps millions of our citizens who face daily humiliation simply because they don't fit someone's idea of what a proper customer looks like. How many others have been turned away from this counter? How many gave up and went home, their problems unsolved, their dignity trampled?" A man in the queue, emboldened by the president's words, spoke up. "Sir, I'm ashamed to say I stood here and watched this happen. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my business." "And that is exactly the problem," Traoré replied, not unkindly. "Evil thrives not just because of those who commit it, but because of those who witness it and remain silent. Every person who stood here and said nothing became an accomplice to this injustice." Another customer, an elderly man, stepped forward. "You're right, Mr. President. We should have spoken up. Sometimes we forget that silence itself is a form of cruelty." President Traoré nodded. "Remember this moment. Remember how your silence felt. And the next time you witness someone being mistreated, whether in a bank, a hospital, a government office, or on the street, find your voice. Stand up. Because that's how societies change, one person at a time, choosing courage over comfort." By now, the bank manager had completed the transaction. He approached Amina with the utmost deference, holding an envelope containing her money with both hands. "Madam Amina, on behalf of the National Savings Bank, I offer our deepest, most sincere apologies. What happened today was inexcusable. Your account has been active and in good standing for over 4 decades. You have been nothing but a responsible, honest customer, and you were treated abominably." He handed her the envelope. "Here is your money. Additionally, I'm waiving all withdrawal fees as a gesture of our apology, and I promise you, we will make changes to ensure this never happens to anyone else." Amina accepted the envelope with trembling hands. She opened it and saw the money she had saved for so long, money that would save Musa's life. Relief flooded through her, but it was mixed with so many other emotions that she could barely process them all. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, looking at President Traoré, she said more firmly, "Thank you for seeing me, for hearing me, for treating me like I matter." "You do matter," Traoré said quietly. "You always have. Never doubt your worth, sister." As Amina prepared to leave, the young teller who had dismissed her finally found his voice. He stood up from his chair, his face pale and his eyes red-rimmed. "Madam Amina, I owe you an apology. I judged you based on your appearance. I assumed you were trying to cheat us because you looked poor. I didn't do my job. I didn't show you basic human respect. I'm deeply, deeply sorry." Amina looked at him for a long moment. Despite everything he had put her through, she saw in his face genuine remorse. "I forgive you, my son," she said softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "I will learn from this. I promise you, I will never treat anyone this way again." President Traoré placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "The measure of a person is not whether they make mistakes, but what they do after making them. You have a choice now. You can let this break you, or you can let it remake you into someone better. I hope you choose the latter." "I will, sir," the teller said, wiping his eyes. "I will." The president turned to address the entire bank staff who had gathered to witness this unprecedented scene. "Starting today, I want this bank and every bank in this nation to implement comprehensive customer service training. Not just technical training about procedures and protocols, but training in basic human dignity. Teach your employees that behind every account number is a person with hopes, fears, and struggles. Teach them that wealth is not a measure of worth and poverty is not a crime." The bank manager nodded vigorously. "We will implement this immediately, Mr. President. We'll make this a case study, a teaching moment for every employee." "Good," Traoré said, "and let the story of Sister Amina be told not as a scandal, but as a reminder of why we must never lose our humanity in pursuit of efficiency or profit." As President Traoré and Amina walked toward the bank's exit together, the entire hall watched in respectful silence. Employees and customers alike stood still, many with their heads bowed in contemplation of what they had witnessed. One young employee, barely out of university, worked up the courage to speak. "Mr. President, may I ask you something?" Traoré paused and turned to him. "Of course." "Sir, why did you wait in the regular queue? You could have had a private appointment, VIP treatment, security clearing the way. Why subject yourself to this?" President Traoré smiled slightly. "That's exactly the point. If I only saw the carefully prepared face that institutions show to VIPs, I would never understand the reality my people face every day. Leadership isn't about sitting in air-conditioned offices, making decisions based on reports and statistics. It's about walking in the shoes of your citizens, seeing what they see, feeling what they feel." He gestured around the bank. "This morning, I learned more about the state of customer service in this country than 100 reports could have told me. I saw firsthand how easy it is for systems to fail the most vulnerable. And now I can work to fix it, not based on theory, but based on lived experience." Another customer, an older businessman, spoke up. "But isn't it dangerous, Mr. President, walking around without security, exposing yourself to potential threats?" "A leader who fears his own people has already failed," Traoré replied. "If I can't walk safely among the citizens I serve, then I'm not doing my job properly. The best security comes not from armed guards, but from the trust and goodwill of the people. When leaders serve with integrity and justice, they earn protection that no amount of guns can provide." As they reached the exit, Amina turned to look back at the bank one last time. The building that had filled her with such dread and anxiety just an hour ago now seemed different somehow. The employees who had witnessed this scene would remember it forever. Change had begun here today. Outside, the morning had progressed, and the street was now bustling with activity. Vendors called out their wares, children walked to school, and the city pulsed with life. Amina paused on the sidewalk, clutching her envelope close to her chest, and looked up at President Traoré. "My son," she said softly, "I don't know how to thank you properly. You saved more than my grandson today. You saved my dignity." "I only did what any decent person should do," Traoré replied, "but I'm glad I could help. How will you get to the hospital?" "I'll take a taxi," Amina said. "My daughter is waiting there with Musa. She'll be so relieved when I arrive with the money." "Please," Traoré said, pulling out his phone, "let me arrange transportation for you. It's the least I can do." "No," Amina protested gently. "You've already done so much. I can manage." "I insist," the president said with a warm smile. "A grandmother on a mission to save her grandson deserves safe, comfortable transport." Within minutes, a vehicle arrived, not an official government car, but a regular taxi. Traoré spoke quietly with the driver, pressed some money into his hand, insisting on covering the fare, and helped Amina into the back seat. "Take care of your grandson," he said, through the open window, "and please send word to the presidential office to let us know how he's doing. I'd like to follow up." Amina's eyes widened. "You really care about what happens to us?" "Every citizen matters," Traoré said simply, "from the richest business person to the poorest farmer. That's not just a political slogan for me, it's a fundamental belief." As the taxi pulled away, Amina looked back through the rear window and saw President Traoré standing on the sidewalk, waving. Around him, a small crowd had gathered, people who had recognized him or been drawn by the unusual scene. But he wasn't rushing to leave or calling for security to disperse them. He was simply standing there, talking with ordinary citizens, listening to their concerns, shaking hands. The taxi driver, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Madame, do you know what you just witnessed? That's President Traoré. He's known for doing things like this, walking among the people, listening to their problems. My cousin saw him at a hospital once, sitting in the regular waiting area, talking to patients. No fanfare, no cameras, just genuine interest in people's lives." Amina nodded, still processing everything that had happened. "He stood up for me when no one else would," she said softly. "Even the other customers, who could have spoken, they remained silent." "That's a shame they'll carry," the driver said. "Sometimes the hardest thing is finding the courage to stand against injustice when you see it. It's easier to look away, to tell yourself it's not your problem. But President Traoré didn't look away." "No," Amina agreed. "He didn't." The taxi wove through the streets of Ouagadougou, and Amina watched the city pass by her window. Somewhere in this bustling capital, her grandson was waiting, sick and scared. But soon, very soon, she would be there with the money for his treatment. Everything was going to be all right. Meanwhile, back at the bank, the atmosphere remained charged with emotion. The bank manager had called an emergency staff meeting, and every employee was gathered in the main hall. "What happened today will be remembered," the manager began, his voice serious. "An elderly woman, a loyal customer of 42 years, was humiliated by our staff. She was accused of fraud without any investigation. She was judged by her appearance rather than treated with professional respect. And it took the intervention of our president, who happened to be here as a regular customer, to correct this injustice." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "This is unacceptable, not just because the president witnessed it, but because it should never happen regardless of who's watching. Each person who walks through those doors deserves respect, courtesy, and professional service, whether they arrive in a Mercedes or on foot, whether they're wearing expensive jewelry or worn clothes, whether they're young or old. They are all equally valuable customers and equally deserving citizens. One of the senior employees raised her hand. "Sir, what changes are we implementing?" "Effective immediately," the manager announced. "We're instituting a comprehensive training program. Every employee, from tellers to senior staff, will undergo sensitivity training. We'll learn about unconscious bias, professional courtesy, and the importance of dignity in customer service. Sister Amina's story will be shared as a case study, not to shame anyone, but to educate everyone about how easy it is to fall into the trap of prejudice." He continued, "We're also changing our procedures. From now on, before any documents are rejected, they must be verified in the system. No more snap judgments, no more assumptions. Every customer will be treated with the presumption that they are honest and legitimate unless proven otherwise, not the other way around." The young teller who had mistreated Amina spoke up, his voice subdued. "Sir, I know I failed today. I failed Sister Amina, I failed the bank, and I failed myself. I want to be part of the solution. Please let me help with the training program. Let me share my mistake so others can learn from it." The manager studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That takes courage. Yes, your perspective will be valuable. Sometimes the best teachers are those who have learned hard lessons themselves." As the meeting concluded, employees dispersed with thoughtful expressions. Many were examining their own behaviors, questioning whether they too had made similar judgments about customers without realizing it. The seed of change had been planted, and it would grow in the days and weeks to come. News of the incident spread rapidly throughout Ouagadougou. By midday, it was the talk of the city. Market vendors discussed it, radio stations reported it, and social media buzzed with reactions. The story took on different forms as it was retold. Some versions were embellished, others simplified, but the core message remained consistent. President Ibrahim Traoré had defended an elderly woman against mistreatment, and in doing so, had demonstrated what true leadership looks like. In one neighborhood, a group of women gathered at a community center discussed the incident while working on their handicrafts. "Did you hear what happened at the National Bank?" one woman asked. "Yes, they say the president himself was there, dressed like an ordinary person," another replied. "He stood up for an old woman who was being disrespected." "That's what a real leader does," an older woman added, nodding sagely. "He doesn't just talk about serving the people, he actually does it. He sees us, he hears us." "My son works at that bank," another woman said quietly. "He called me this morning very upset. He said he was there and didn't speak up when the woman was being mistreated. He feels ashamed now." "Good," the older woman said firmly. "Shame can be a teacher if we let it. Tell your son to use this feeling to become better, to find his voice the next time he sees injustice." In a school not far away, a teacher used the incident as a lesson for her students. "Class, today we're going to talk about something that happened in our city just this morning," she began. "It's a story about courage, dignity, and what it means to be a good citizen." She recounted the story of Amina and President Traoré, watching as her students listened with attent rapture. When she finished, a young girl raised her hand. "Teacher, why didn't the other people in the bank help the old lady?" "That's an excellent question, Fatima," the teacher replied. "Sometimes people don't help because they're afraid, or because they think someone else will do it, or because they convince themselves it's not their responsibility. But you know what? Every single person there had the power to speak up. Every one of them could have been the hero of this story." "So what should they have done?" a boy asked. "They should have used their voices," the teacher said. "They could have said, 'Excuse me, this doesn't seem right. Please check the system before making accusations.' It doesn't take power or authority to do the right thing, it just takes courage." "Is that what being a good citizen means?" Fatima asked. "Speaking up when things are wrong?" "That's exactly what it means. Being a good citizen isn't just about following laws and paying taxes, it's about actively participating in making society better. It's about standing up for others, especially those who are vulnerable." Another student spoke up. "But what if speaking up makes people angry with you?" "Then you know you're doing something important," the teacher replied. "The right thing is often the hard thing. But remember this, today, because President Traoré spoke up, that elderly woman got justice. Her grandson will receive medical treatment, and a whole bank is changing its policies. One voice made all that difference." The children sat in thoughtful silence, absorbing the lesson. These young minds would carry this story forward, and perhaps when they faced their own moments of moral choice, they would remember Amina and find the courage to act. At the regional hospital, Amina finally arrived, her heart racing with anticipation and relief. She hurried through the corridors, following the familiar path to the pediatric ward where Musa had been transferred. Her daughter, Fatuma, was sitting beside the boy's bed, her face drawn with worry and exhaustion from days of keeping vigil. "Mama!" Fatuma exclaimed when she saw Amina enter. Were you able?" Amina held up the envelope, and Fatuma's face crumpled with relief. Mother and daughter embraced, both crying, tears of worry releasing, tears of gratitude flowing. "I have the money, all of it. Musa will get his treatment." Little Musa, weak but conscious, looked up at his grandmother with wide eyes. "Grandma, you came back?" "Of course I came back, my darling. Did you think I would leave you? Never! Grandma fought for you today, and we won." As the doctors were informed and preparations began for Musa's treatment, Amina told Fatuma the whole story. The humiliation at the bank, the intervention of President Traoré, the dramatic revelation, and the changes that were being implemented. Fatuma listened in amazement. "Mama, the president himself stood up for you?" "He didn't see me as just an old woman," Amina said, her voice filled with wonder. "He saw me as a person, as someone deserving of dignity and respect. He reminded everyone there that I mattered." "You've always mattered, Mama," Fatuma said, squeezing her mother's hand. "But I'm grateful someone with power recognized it today." Over the following days, Musa received the treatment he needed. The doctors worked diligently, and slowly but surely the young boy's health improved. His fever broke, his strength returned, and the color came back to his cheeks. Each day, Amina sat by his bedside, sometimes telling him stories, sometimes just holding his hand, grateful beyond words that she had been able to save him. During one of these visits, a hospital administrator appeared at the door with an unexpected message. "Madam Amina," she said respectfully, "the presidential office has been in contact. President Traoré asked to be updated on your grandson's condition. He wanted to ensure the boy was receiving proper care." Amina was stunned. He really followed up?" "Yes, madam. He takes a personal interest in the well-being of citizens, especially after incidents like the one at the bank. He also wanted me to inform you that the hospital has been instructed to provide the best possible care for Musa, and that any additional costs beyond what you've paid will be covered by a special presidential fund for families in need." Tears streamed down Amina's face. "Please, tell him that we are forever grateful. Tell him that Musa is recovering well, and tell him that I pray for him every day." "I will convey your message, madam," the administrator said with a warm smile. 3 weeks later, Musa was discharged from the hospital, fully recovered. The family returned to their village, where neighbors and relatives celebrated the boy's return to health. Word of Amina's experience at the bank had reached even their remote community, and she found herself treated with newfound respect and admiration. But Amina herself felt changed in a more fundamental way. For so many years, she had accepted her place at the margins of society, a poor, elderly widow whose voice didn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. But that day at the bank, someone had seen her, someone had heard her, someone had stood up for her, and not just anyone, the president himself. It awakened something in her, a realization that she had always possessed dignity and worth, even when others failed to recognize it. She began speaking up more in village meetings, advocating for other elderly community members who faced challenges. She became a voice for those who felt voiceless, inspired by the example President Traoré had set. One evening, as she sat with Musa under the vast African sky, the boy asked her, "Grandma, why do you think the president helped you that day?" Amina thought carefully before answering. "I think, my child, he helped me because he understands something important. He understands that a nation is only as strong as how it treats its weakest members. If the elderly, the poor, the vulnerable are dismissed and disrespected, then something is deeply wrong with that society." "Will you ever meet him again?" Musa asked. "I don't know," Amina replied, "but I don't need to meet him again to be grateful. What he taught me, and what he taught everyone who witnessed that moment, will last forever. He showed us that power should be used to lift people up, not keep them down." "When I grow up," Musa said thoughtfully, "I want to help people like President Traoré did." Amina smiled and pulled the boy close. "Then you will have learned the most important lesson of all." Back in Ouagadougou, the changes at the National Savings Bank were taking root. The training program had been implemented with remarkable thoroughness. Every employee attended workshops on unconscious bias, customer dignity, and professional ethics. Amina's story was indeed shared as a central case study, and it had a profound impact on staff members. The young teller who had mistreated Amina, his name was Kwame, had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. The incident had shaken him to his core, forcing him to examine prejudices he hadn't even realized he held. He volunteered to speak at every training session, sharing his mistake openly and honestly. "I thought I was a good person," he told his colleagues during one session. "I thought I treated everyone fairly, but when Sister Amina stood before me, I made instant judgments based on how she looked. I saw her worn clothes, her trembling hands, her age, and I decided she wasn't worth my time or respect. I didn't even do the basic job of checking the system. I just dismissed her." He paused, emotion evident in his voice. "I think it took the president, disguised as an ordinary citizen, to show me how wrong I was. I'm grateful he was there that day, because if he wasn't, I might have gone on thinking my behavior was acceptable. I might have mistreated countless other customers in the same way." His honesty resonated with other employees, many of whom recognized similar tendencies in themselves. The training sessions became spaces for genuine reflection and growth, not just checkbox exercises to satisfy management requirements. The bank also implemented systemic changes. New protocols required that all customer documents be verified in the system before any judgment was made. Mystery shoppers were hired to test customer service quality. Regular feedback sessions were held where customers could voice concerns. And perhaps most importantly, a customer dignity charter was created and displayed prominently in every branch, outlining the bank's commitment to treating every person with respect, regardless of their appearance or socioeconomic status. Other banks across the country took notice. The story of Amina had become so well known that financial institutions realized they needed to examine their own practices. Within 6 months, the Banking Association of Burkina Faso had adopted similar standards nationwide, making customer dignity a core principle of financial service in the country. A year after the incident, the National Savings Bank organized a special event to commemorate the changes that had been implemented. They invited Amina as the guest of honor, not to exploit her story, but to genuinely acknowledge her role in sparking transformation. Amina was reluctant at first. She didn't like being the center of attention, and the memory of that difficult day still carried some pain. But her daughter convinced her to go. "Mama, your experience helped change things for everyone. Other elderly people, other poor people, they're being treated better now because of what happened to you. You should be there to see the good that came from your suffering." So Amina made the journey back to Ouagadougou, this time accompanied by Fatuma and a healthy, energetic Musa. When they arrived at the bank, they were greeted with genuine warmth and respect. Employees who had been present that fateful day approached her with sincere apologies and gratitude. Kwame, the young teller, was especially emotional. "Madame Amina," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "I want you to know that not a day goes by when I don't think about how I treated you. Your forgiveness meant everything to me, and I've tried every single day since then to be worthy of it. I've changed how I interact with every customer, no, with every person I meet." "I can see that, my son," Amina said gently. "And I'm proud of you. It takes strength to admit mistakes and grow from them." During the ceremony, the bank manager spoke about the journey of transformation the institution had undergone. "A year ago, we failed one of our most loyal customers. We let prejudice and assumptions guide our actions instead of professionalism and basic human decency. But from that failure came an opportunity to examine ourselves honestly and become better." He gestured to Amina. Sister Amina didn't just save her grandson that day. She saved this institution from its own worst tendencies. She held up a mirror that showed us who we were and forced us to become who we should be. Then came an unexpected moment. The doors to the bank opened, and President Ibrahim Traoré walked in, once again dressed simply, once again without fanfare. The room erupted in surprised applause. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by uninvited," he said with a smile. "But when I heard about this event, I wanted to see Sister Amina again and witness the changes firsthand." Amina's face lit up with joy. "Mr. President, you remembered us." "How could I forget?" Traoré replied warmly, approaching her and clasping both her hands in his. "How is the boy?" "He's wonderful," Amina said, pulling Musa forward. "Healthy and strong thanks to you." "Not thanks to me," Traoré corrected gently. "Thanks to your love and determination. I simply ensured you received what was rightfully yours." The president then addressed the assembled crowd. "What happened here a year ago was both terrible and beautiful. Terrible because it revealed how easily we can dehumanize each other. Beautiful because it showed that change is possible when we choose to be better." He looked around at the bank employees. "I've been following your progress. The training programs, the policy changes, the commitment to dignity. These are not just words on paper. I've heard from customers across the country about how service has improved, not just here, but at banks everywhere. You've started a movement. Then he turned to address a wider point. But let me be clear. This can't be a momentary enthusiasm that fades with time. True change requires constant vigilance. It's easy to be good when the president is watching. The real test is maintaining these standards when no one is watching, when there's no recognition or reward, when it's just you and a customer who needs help. Kwame spoke up. Sir, we understand that. We've made it part of our culture now, not just our rules. Every morning, before we start work, we remind each other of our commitment to dignity. We share stories of positive interactions. We hold each other accountable. That's exactly what I hoped to hear, Traoré said, nodding approvingly. After the ceremony, as people mingled and shared refreshments, President Traoré spent time talking with individual employees, asking about their experiences and listening carefully to their insights. He also spoke at length with Amina about her life, her family, and her hopes for the future. You know, Amina said at one point, I used to think that people like me, poor, old, uneducated, didn't matter much in the big picture. But you taught me that everyone matters. Every single person has worth. You always had worth, Traoré said firmly. My presence that day didn't give you value, you already possessed it. I simply reminded others to recognize what was always there. Young Musa, who had been listening, suddenly spoke up. Mr. President, I'm studying hard in school. When I grow up, I want to help people the way you helped my grandmother. Traoré knelt down to the boy's eye level. That's a wonderful goal, Musa. But remember, you don't need to be president to help people. Every day, in small ways, you can make someone's life better. Sometimes the greatest acts of leadership happen in quiet moments that no one else sees. Like standing up for someone in a bank? Musa asked. Exactly like that, Traoré confirmed with a smile. As the years passed, the story of Amina and President Traoré became embedded in the national consciousness of Burkina Faso. It was taught in schools as an example of civic courage and leadership. It was referenced in government training programs as a model for public service. It was invoked in conversations about dignity, respect, and social justice. But perhaps its most important impact was on individuals who encountered their own moments of choice. Moments when they could speak up or stay silent, act or turn away. Many people across the country found themselves thinking, what would President Traoré do in this situation? What would I want someone to do if this was my grandmother, my mother, my child? And often, inspired by that memory, they chose courage over comfort. They chose to speak up, to stand up, to show up for others who needed support. In one instance, a doctor in a rural clinic refused to turn away a patient who couldn't afford the consultation fee, citing the Amina principle that every person deserves dignity regardless of their financial situation. The story had given him moral authority to override bureaucratic rules in service of human need. In another case, a young woman witnessed an elderly man being harassed by police officers who assumed he was homeless and had no right to sit on a public bench. Remembering how President Traoré had intervened, she pulled out her phone, began recording, and calmly but firmly questioned the police officer's behavior. The harassment stopped, and the elderly man was left in peace. These ripples spread outward, one story inspiring countless others, one act of courage giving permission for many more. Amina lived to see her grandson graduate from university, the first in their family to receive higher education. Musa had indeed dedicated himself to helping others, training to become a social worker focused on elderly care and rights. His childhood experience, nearly dying, being saved by his grandmother's determination, and witnessing the power of dignified leadership, had shaped his entire life's direction. At Musa's graduation ceremony, now quite elderly and frail, Amina sat in the front row, her face beaming with pride. When Musa received his diploma and was asked to say a few words, he spoke from the heart. "My education was saved by my grandmother's love, but it was saved in another way too, by a leader who understood that the measure of a nation is how it treats those who have the least power." He recounted the story once more, and though many in the audience had heard it before, they listened with rapt attention. It was a story that never grew old, because its message remained eternally relevant. President Traoré didn't help my grandmother because there were cameras present, or because he wanted recognition. He helped her because it was the right thing to do, because she was a human being who deserved dignity. That lesson has guided my entire life. I hope it will guide my career as I work to ensure that elderly citizens are never again made to feel invisible or worthless. The audience rose in applause. Amina wiped tears from her weathered cheeks, overwhelmed by how far they had all come from that difficult morning at the bank so many years ago. After the ceremony, as family and friends celebrated, Amina found a quiet moment to sit alone with her thoughts. She reflected on her long life, the hardships, the joys, the struggles, and the triumphs. That day at the bank had been one of the lowest points, but it had also been a turning point, not just for her, but for so many others. She thought about dignity, how fragile it could be, how easily it could be stripped away by careless words or prejudiced assumptions, but also how powerful it was when recognized and defended. Dignity wasn't something given by others, it was inherent, but it took people of courage and conviction to ensure that inherent dignity was respected and protected. She thought about President Traoré, who could have chosen comfort and distance, but instead chose to walk among his people, to see their struggles firsthand, to use his power in service of those who had none. That was leadership, not the loud, boastful kind that demanded attention, but the quiet, firm kind that simply did what was right. And she thought about all the ordinary people who had been inspired to find their own courage, to speak their own truths, to stand up in their own moments of moral choice. That was perhaps the greatest legacy of all. Not that one man had helped one woman, but that one example had given permission for countless acts of everyday heroism. President Ibrahim Traoré, for his part, continued his practice of walking among his citizens without protocol or fanfare. The incident at the bank had not been a publicity stunt or a one-time gesture. It was genuinely how he understood leadership. He believed that a president who lost touch with the people's daily reality would inevitably make decisions that harmed rather than helped. In interviews, when asked about that famous day at the bank, he always deflected attention from himself and refocused it on the larger message. "Sister Amina's story is not about me," he would say. "It's about what happens when systems forget their purpose. It's about the corrosive effect of prejudice. It's about the power of ordinary people to demand better. I happened to be there that day, but the real heroes are people like Amina, who persist despite obstacles, and people like that young bank teller who had the courage to acknowledge his mistake and grow from it." He often added, "Every day there are thousands of Aminas across our country and around the world, people who are dismissed, disrespected, or denied basic dignity because of how they look or where they come from. We don't need one president to save them all. We need millions of citizens to decide they won't tolerate such treatment. That's how societies truly change. This philosophy guided his governance. He implemented policies aimed at protecting the most vulnerable citizens: elderly care programs, farmer support initiatives, healthcare access improvements, and banking regulations that prioritized customer dignity. But more importantly, he worked to shift culture, to change how people thought about power and service. On the 10th anniversary of the incident, the National Savings Bank commissioned a small monument to be placed in their main branch. It was a simple sculpture, a bench with two figures sitting on it, one clearly elderly, one in ordinary clothes, engaged in conversation. A plaque beneath read, "In memory of the day we learned that true leadership serves, that dignity belongs to all, and that silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit. May we never forget this lesson." The monument became a gathering place, a spot where people would bring elderly family members to sit and rest while waiting for service. Bank employees made it a point to check on anyone sitting there, offering water, asking if they needed assistance, ensuring they were comfortable. It was a small thing, but symbolic. The bank that once had been a place of humiliation for Amina had transformed into a place that actively honored her memory by treating every customer with the respect she had been denied. Amina herself passed away peacefully at the age of 89, surrounded by her loving family. At her funeral, the church was packed with mourners, not just family and neighbors, but people from across the country who had been touched by her story. Bank employees came to pay their respects. The young teller, Kwame, now a senior manager, spoke through tears about how Amina's forgiveness had changed his life. And President Traoré came, once again without fanfare, to pay his respects to the woman who had taught a nation about dignity. He sat with the family, shared memories, and reminded Musa and the others that Amina's legacy would endure. "Your grandmother," he told them, "reminded us all of something we should never forget, that every person, regardless of their station in life, deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be treated with respect. That lesson is as important today as it was 10 years ago. It will be important 10 years from now and 100 years from now. We must keep teaching it, keep living it, and keep defending it." In the end, we are all measured, not by our words or our intentions, but by how we treat those who have no power to reward or punish us, those who society says don't matter, those who are easily dismissed or overlooked. In those moments, our true character is revealed. May we all have the courage of President Traoré to see beyond appearances, to stand against injustice, and to recognize the inherent worth in every person. And may we all remember Amina, a simple grandmother whose quiet dignity and persistence became a catalyst for change, whose story reminds us that every single person matters, and that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with one voice refusing to be silenced. The end.